Springfield's Talk 1041. Welcome, everyone, to the show. My name is Nick Reed. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line is 447 KSGF. I'd like to send in any text messages. Please feel free to do so. In fact, there's one I'll address. It's a question that, as some of the programming changes that we made out of some necessity, but also just to improve our lineup, you know, gosh, I mentioned it once and not everyone heard the reasons why. What? Obviously, even whenever announcements are made, you're not able to listen all the time. And some people have called in like, what happened to Ben Shapiro? What happened to the two hosts? Charlie Kirk's replaced. What's going on there? Both Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh shows that we carried at from 8 to 9 and 9 to 10. They ended their shows at the end of the month. I don't know if the 31st was a Friday or not, but whatever the last Friday of, the year 2024, they just stopped doing their radio shows. And, they let the affiliates know several weeks in advance that was going to be coming so that the affiliates could, make plans so that when the very first Monday in January of 2025 came, you wouldn't have dead air there. And Charlie Kirk is someone that we had been looking at for some time because of his popularity and even activism in the area. His Turning Point USA having chapters at, I know at least one high school here, also MSU. I think there's some other areas as well and some other learning institutions that have their chapters of Turning Point USA. So there's already a relationship that a lot of people in the community had with Charlie Kirk, and he's just been a show that he's just done a tremendous job in expanding his show, doing college tours, and really helping get the truth out there when it comes to elections. And so it was a perfect fit for us. And given that we had that opening occurring because of Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh deciding not to do their radio shows any longer, it just, the timing of it is, it worked out perfectly. As to why Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro had opted to no longer provide a radio program at the end of the year, I'm not sure their reasoning for that. I don't know if it's just become, too much to juggle. Both of them obviously have a number of different ventures out there. Matt Walsh doing a lot of his own film stuff. They're two of my favorite shows personally, so I was disappointed to see those go away. But I just... and whenever the text messages do come in, a lot of times it's going to be you that listens at night. And you're like, hey, what happened here? And so you send in a text, which is what that text line is for, just to ask questions and to give feedback, whether it's show content or about show lineup. We will try and respond to those. But, as they come in as well, I'll continue to mention it. I suspect in 8 months from now, we'll still have some random hey, why'd you get rid of Ben Shapiro? Sometimes it hilarious to me. It'd be a year later some change will occur, and somebody's like, hey, why'd you guys do this? And they're like, oh my gosh, that was a really, really long time ago. But that's, just the nature of things. It's not aggravating or anything. I get it as somebody who listens to radio myself and has been a long-time radio listener. When something changes, you may not catch it for a while, and you want to know what it is. So I'm glad that you reach out and you ask, and those are the reasons. Nothing real fancy or scandalous. They just stopped doing their shows. We dealt with that forever and a day ago when Neil Bortz decided to retire, and then we had put Dennis Miller in there who had a show, and then he up and decided he didn't want to do radio any longer. And so, sometimes these changes just happen, and that's one of them. Fortunately for us, we were able to get one of the premier hosts added to our lineup in order to replace those two individuals, and that's the Charlie Kirk show. Yesterday, I don't know about you, but I'm sure that many of you still get really frustrated, maybe even angry at certain headlines that it's like we're right back to taking things that Trump says And instead of taking a real intellectual look at, okay, well, why is he saying this? What does he mean? What's behind this? Doesn't mean that one has to agree with him, but really evaluating it, they take this very one-dimensional way of presenting a headline to make it sound completely awful. As you know, for example, he's been talking about a number of different things from Greenland and strategically acquiring Greenland from Denmark, which is, currently, I don't know if you want to call it owner, but they have a relationship with Greenland not too far off the mark from what we have with Puerto Rico, for example, where there is that it's not full autonomy. They're not fully autonomous. Denmark is the authority over Greenland. And Trump has talked about, hey, maybe we ought to take Greenland. And then there's been discussion about Panama Canal and so forth. But, so what do you get? Instead of these in-depth pieces about, well, why Greenland? What's the deal here? Why would Trump say, and here's the history, and here are the reasons why? You get headlines like this from UPI News: Trump threatens sovereignty of Panama, Greenland, and Canada. And I get frustrated, admittedly, because there are really interesting reasons behind much of this. Again, perhaps strategically, reasons not everyone is going to agree with. But instead of addressing that and informing the public, it's like, oh, Trump's threatening to take over the world. We're going to start hearing the Hitler comparisons again, or maybe we'll go as far back as Genghis Khan. He's just wanting to take over all these countries. This is insanity. But then I think to myself, nobody really believes you guys anymore anyway, and I just chuckle about it. I think, you know what, this is actually funny. And it's the privilege of in retrospect, recognizing that really the vast majority of people don't believe the media anyhow any longer, particularly when it comes to politics and Trump. They don't have any meaningful credibility. With some people, there's credibility they have. Usually, it's people who hate Trump anyway, and so it's not a credibility issue as much as just validating their ideas and their beliefs that Trump is horrible, and so they like to hear that validation through these news outlets. But that's not relevant in our overall country any longer. I also think it's one of the reasons that Trump has been noticeably less fiery with the press. Is I don't think he worries about what they say about him so much anymore, because one, he's not running for re-election anyhow, but two, this last election showed anything. It doesn't matter what they say about him. I mean, they've compared him to Hitler, falsely claimed he's going to execute generals, put political opposition in concentration camps. I mean, you got to the point where you would grasp at what possible things could they say next about him, and he still won. And so when I see these headlines or these news stories or these discussions on some of the news outlets that are so blatantly inaccurate, spreading disinformation, trying to paint Trump as something that isn't what he's actually talking about. Instead of getting frustrated, mad, angry, thinking about, oh, but people, they're going to believe that. I think we know at this point most of them don't. Not the reasonable ones, anyhow. I want to also play coming up Mark Zuckerberg, this announcement that he made yesterday. We mentioned it yesterday, but I wanted to play the full audio of his announcement. It's a few minutes long, but there's some very important information, and I think a lot of important questions that come up. By the way, the left is pitching a fit over this, and it is remarkable that they're acknowledging in their complaints on this, be it PolitiFact or CNN or MSNBC, that free speech is a conservative value. That when Zuckerberg is talking about pulling away from censorship, that is going to create a MAGA world. And so not only over the years has the left in this country acknowledged that making our country great is something that is part of the conservative value, Make America Great Again. That's a bad thing. That's a Trump thing. Success is a Trump thing. Whereas the status quo and failure is the Democrat thing. Now they're fully acknowledging in their evaluation of this pulling back of censorship that Mark Zuckerberg has said is going to be the way forward for Facebook and Instagram. That also, lack of censorship, is a Trump thing. This is making America great. This is another horrific result of MAGA America, and that is pulling away from censorship and evaluate or having a respect for free speech. And to a degree, there's almost, and I don't like I told you so's, but there's almost this I told you so to all of the people out there who have said Democrats aren't anti-constitutional, Democrats aren't against free speech, Democrats aren't for censorship, and to have them openly acknowledge that, yes, in fact, they are. There's just a little bit of, okay, now we can have a discussion about this, that you're finally admitting where you are on the issue. Latest news update. Slider broke.
Oh no.
I can fix it though.
Oh geez.
That's
Okay.
of all the things that fall apart in here, this isn't normally one of them.
High class radio over here.
It was my carelessness.
Okay, that first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies with a high near 24. Tonight clear with a low around 13. For your Thursday, cloudy with a high near 37 and a 20% chance of snow after 4 p.m. And that percentage will tick up as we move into Thursday night. And for your Friday, mostly cloudy with a high near 33.
the left, the media, allowing itself to go apoplectic over a number of different things. And some of them, of course, are actually pretty benign. I just love the announcement. We'll talk about this later. Trump about renaming the Gulf of Mexico Gulf of America. And because I know instinctually the left, just that sort of thing infuriates them. But if you ask them why, I imagine they don't even know. There are certain things that I think they could cobble together, some sort of response, but they've gotten themselves so trained, like Pavlov's dog, to salivate hatred every time Trump makes some sort of announcement that gets coverage, that oftentimes I don't know that they even know why it is that they get angry. I think that's a pretty humorous announcement. I did think, now, how does, like, all right, well, even if we change what we call it, that doesn't necessarily mean everyone will. Will map makers start changing how it's printed? It brought up a lot of questions that aren't groundbreaking, but just the logistics of these things I oftentimes find to be interesting. But in reality, when you talk about the Americas, you're talking about, I mean, just north all the way down through South America. And the Gulf of Mexico is also a Gulf of the United States of America, as well as Mexico, which is part of North America. And so, not that this is the argument that he's necessarily making, and I don't know if he will, but it actually is more accurate to call it the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Americas, to call it one of the two as opposed to the Gulf of Mexico. It's one of those issues that isn't really at all that big of a deal, but just to watch the way that some people will act as if this is a declaration of war on Mexico. Their sovereignty is in danger because of Donald Trump. It's like, okay, let's scale it back a little bit, particularly from people who want to demand that citizens call a boy a girl if the boy wants them to. I think changing the name of Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America isn't really that far of a stretch outside the realm of what the expectations are of the left when it comes to renaming things. Like, you really want to battle one-on-one, like who is more audacious in their demands that you call certain things what they're not? Because I don't think that's a battle the left's going to win. Also, of course, yesterday they're going nuts over the fact that they are no longer, or at least this is as stated by Mark Zuckerberg, it's going to be potentially more difficult for them to utilize Facebook as an outlet in order to just brazenly lie about Republicans, about Trump. A perfect example of this was Amy Klobuchar, who got on X, the community notes, corrected her when she falsely claimed that police officers were killed in the Capitol on January 6th. And they've been accustomed to spreading disinformation like that and not being called out on it. And they really fear losing that power, that ability to without any sort of pushback, straight up lie about things. It would be interesting to see any sort of polling regarding what percentage of Americans believe that police officers were killed in the Capitol on January 6th. I bet a majority of people do, even though that did not happen. But it's been the ability of Democrats to, unfettered, lie about these things on, among other outlets, regular media, but social media as well. And so this is one of the reasons they're really panicked about it. We're going to take a break, and then just a quick one, and then I'm going to play Zuckerberg's announcement that he posted yesterday. He breaks it down like this is what's going to change. And then he explains why. I think there's a lot of interesting commentary going on. A lot of, oh, well, now you're changing. Now that it's easy for you to change. But I think there may be a little more depth to it than that. And Zuckerberg, he sort of touches the peripheral of that, I believe, in his statement yesterday. So we'll have that coming up next. I'm Nick Reed. All right, now I'm going to play something we talked about yesterday. Zuckerberg announcing that they were going to pull back from censorship, be more about free exchange of ideas on the meta social media platforms. And in here, he breaks down, I think it's 5 things that you'll notice that are different, and then gives a bit of an explanation as to why. And there's some important stuff in here. That's why I'm going to play it in its entirety, and then we'll talk about it.
Hey everyone, I want to talk about something important today because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms. Third, we're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms. We used to have filters that scanned for any policy violation. Now, we're going to focus those filters on tackling illegal and high-severity violations. And for lower severity violations, we're going to rely on someone reporting an issue before we take action. The problem is that the filters make mistakes, and they take down a lot of content that they shouldn't. So by dialing them back, we're going to dramatically reduce the amount of censorship on our platforms. We're also going to tune our content filters to require much higher confidence before taking down content. The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down. Fourth, we're bringing back civic content. For a while, the community asked to see less politics because it was making people stressed. So we stopped recommending these posts. But it feels like we're in a new era now, and we're starting to get feedback that people want to see this content again. So we're going to start phasing this back into Facebook, Instagram, and Threads while working to keep the communities friendly and positive. Fifth, we're going to move our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California, and our US-based content review is going to be based in Texas. As we work to promote free expression, I think that it will help us build trust to do this work in places where there is less concern about the bias of our teams. Finally, we're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more. The US has the strongest constitutional protections for free expression in the world. Europe has an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there. Latin American countries have secret courts that can order companies to quietly take things down. China has censored our apps from even working in the country. The only way that we can push back on this global trend is with the support of the US government. And that's why it's been so difficult over the past 4 years when even the US government has pushed for censorship. By going after us and other American companies, it has emboldened other governments to go even further. But now we have the opportunity to restore free expression, and I am excited to take it. It'll take time to get this right, and these are complex systems. They're never going to be perfect. There's also a lot of illegal stuff that we still need to work very hard to remove. But the bottom line is that after years of having our content moderation work focus primarily on removing content, it is time to focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our systems, and getting back to our roots about giving people voice. I'm looking forward to this next chapter. Stay good out there, and more to come soon.
All right, Mark Zuckerberg yesterday, that was his full video announcement about pulling back from censorship in essentially what he's saying is the Trump era and getting back to a more freedom-oriented platform. I think that, and he touches on the edges of this a bit, that there's something a lot deeper that's going on here, and I believe it probably it's the result of conversations and assurances that he's gotten from Trump. And I want to talk about those coming up here. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF.
Now don't break the slider over there again. I said, now
What?
don't break your slider over
Oh,
there
I
again.
won't.
Your first alert
Attempt not
forecast.
to, anyhow.
Yeah, please don't. Your first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies with a high near 24. Tonight clear with a low around 13. For your Thursday, cloudy with a high near 37 and a 20% chance of snow after 4 p.m. And then on Friday, mostly cloudy with a high near 33.
But before the traffic, we played Mark Zuckerberg's announcement yesterday regarding what he says are going to be changes made, and he specifically cites some of the changes to be in line with what X is doing, and this is to be more of free speech. He cites a number of reasons for this, one of which he just believes with the election of Trump, there's a cultural shift in which the American people have demonstrated they want more free speech. They don't want the totalitarianism of the last 4 years that he even touched on, where he notes our own government was leading the censorship in the world by coming down on us, and that made it very difficult not to do these things. And during the break, Sarah asked a very interesting question. Do you trust him? Well, I think a couple of things need to be evaluated. One, but even let's say Zuckerberg, for whatever reason, genuinely wants to make these changes. Sometimes it's not as easy said as done. Now, Elon Musk, he made these changes, and we saw the way that the media came after him. He went from a darling of the left to enemy number one. We've seen even the Biden administration try to punish him by crafting legislation that would financially benefit his business competition, particularly when it comes to electric vehicles. I think even out in California, Gavin Newsom, it was either on a federal or Gavin Newsom California level, proposed legislation that was going to be beneficial to electric vehicles, but Tesla was left out of it. So it's very clear that Democrats will punish citizens who are business owners if they promote the values that are in opposition to their own values. And Elon Musk is an example of that. And so, Zuckerberg, will he buckle under to that? I mean, they're already attacking him. Is this something that is going to cause him to think twice, or is he going to try to moderate the pullback? Well, we're going to allow a little more free exchange of ideas, but we'll still have a little bit of censorship in there. That is something that only time is going to tell. But then there's the second question: what's the true motivation here? And this is what a lot of people are talking about for good reason. In fact, a couple of your text messages coming in, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy are paying billions for virtual reality, and Zuckerberg's trying to keep that government money coming in for his business interests, Meta specifically. Another text, the Zuckerberg, he's covering his tail, ensuring that his profits, and he's blowing smoke. And so there's a lot of self-preservation talk about this, that it's a new regime in charge, and hey, he's just doing what he did with the previous the still current administration, whatever it was that he felt was going to benefit him the most. When it comes to the Biden administration and Democrats in charge, it was censorship, it was attack on free speech, it was these communist Chinese style ways of suppressing people getting news and information. And now he sees that Trump is more about freedom and the free exchange of ideas. And so that's why he's doing this. He's just going the way that the wind blows. And that may be true, but that may also not necessarily be a bad thing. Something that it's not as prevalent this time around as it was when Trump got elected in 2016 because of a whole number of different issues that are going on. But after Trump got elected last time, even before he was sworn into office, there were all these announcements about businesses that were going to be moving their factories back to the United States, or they were planning on building factories in Mexico or in China, and they would have these meetings with Donald Trump, and then they would come out and they would announce, nope, we're not going to do that any longer. We talked a couple weeks ago about one of the big investors, or one of the big, I think it was an investment firm, I forget the name of it, well, whatever. It was from Japan, and the CEO of the company made that announcement about how now that Trump was president and these conversations that he's had with him, he's going to invest like $250 million or something in the United States, because he believed that the United States was going to change course to where it was beneficial for them. Now, that was an example. This is where things are interesting, and I like to really compare and contrast. So that was an example, and all of those past examples are a demonstration of businesses that were making changes because Trump was president, and they realized that because he was president, the landscape had changed, and it was going to be beneficial for them to bring the factories back to the United States or not have the factories leave to begin with. So it was a self-preservation situation. I look at the Meta with Facebook and Instagram situation, and some of what Zuckerberg said, wonder if that is not what is at play as well. Zuckerberg talked at the end of his explanation as to how things are going to change. And he didn't go into as much detail about this, but he said, listen, over the past several years, we've been dealing with censorship from all different countries. China flat out wouldn't even let us have our apps exist. A lot of countries have secret courts that will block or ban certain things. And he said this has been a constant struggle. I thought what was very telling is he said, and what's made it the most difficult is that the United States was, our own country was doing it to us. And he said it's very difficult to expect other countries to not do it if the land of the free, which has constitutional protections against such government overreach, is happening. And what he's saying there is that, and this is what's really sad about it, the Biden administration was leading the world in censorship. That's what Zuckerberg's assessment was here. That because the Biden administration, with the help of the FBI, CIA, Justice Department, because they were openly, it became known, exerting their influence and their pressure in government to stifle free speech, well, forget about other countries not doing it, because the United States, if the United States is able to do it, and we hear this all the time from the left, lead by example, lead by example. And what Zuckerberg is saying there is that other countries we were leading by example. And so to me, it sounds as if he's saying the landscape has changed here. And Trump has assured me that here in the United States, leader of the world, when it comes to a lot of these the ideas and the adherence to freedom of speech and so forth, that we are going to go back to a government that does not try to suppress free speech and the free exchange of ideas. Now, we can look at that and say to ourselves, well, but that doesn't do him any good in China. It doesn't do him any good here or there. But let's remember, this is a business, and he is a businessman. Mark Zuckerberg, good one or otherwise. And this is what Trump does. This is how Trump wins favor with anyone. It's the art of the deal. Whether it is a foreign leader or it's the CEO of some company, he recognizes what is it that motivates them and how is it that we can get what we need out of them by making sure that they win as well. And I think what very well could be happening here, and Zuckerberg, the way that he wrapped up his little talk yesterday, suggests to me that he's indicating this, is that Trump has said, listen, free speech is on again. And you want me on your side. You know, I'm the art of the deal guy. You know that I'm the guy that has been able for the first time to get NATO to kick in dollars, to get North Korea to stop advancing their nuclear ambitions, to get Mexico to actually start securing the border, and then to get CEOs to recognize that the landscape changes in the United States so that it's beneficial to do things the quote American way. And I suspect that Donald Trump has had those conversations with Mark Zuckerberg. And Mark Zuckerberg, regardless of his ideology, by the way, this isn't a defense of him or his approach. This is just what I believe might be motivating him. Aside from his ideology, these censorship decisions were business decisions. And when, as he noted, you have the United States government coming down on you if you don't censor and you're a business owner, most business owners are going to be like, all right, just tell me what you need me to do. And Trump, I suspect, has had conversations with Zuckerberg saying that's not the way things are going to be done in this country any longer. And it will benefit you. I will make sure that countries that also respect free speech and that allow you to no longer censor, that there will be relationships crafted that they will realize benefit them as well as you, and we're all going to win in this thing. Now, I, of course, don't obviously have any particular insight in this, but that would make sense. This is how Trump operates. And it would satisfy the question as to why is Zuckerberg doing it, because it's good for his business. It also happens to be good for America, happens to be good for the free exchange of ideas if he's able to successfully implement these changes. It's not good for the Democrat Party, which, of course, is why they're already pitching a fit about it. It's not, so, of course, we've come to expect that. So ultimately, if I had to gamble on what this is about, it is to some degree about self-preservation, but it's deeper than, oh, I just want to win favor with the guy who's in the White House right now. It's because he believes Trump can actually create conditions, not just in the United States, but across the world, in which platforms that are for free speech are going to financially benefit. And that's why this course change is taking place. That's what I hope, at least. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. There were talks on the horizon about creating a precedence on what social media can and can't do. Do you think Meta's switching so quickly to prevent a precedent from happening so they can go back to censorship after the Trump era? I don't think that is what's going on. I think, again, probably ultimately it's a business decision. And I think that Trump has convinced Zuckerberg that going back in the way of free speech is going to be beneficial for him, and that Trump's going to help foster a world in which that isn't just going to be in the United States, but it's also going to be throughout the world. Trump's very good at convincing people of things and demonstrating to them how it will benefit them. You look beyond the United States, look at the landscape right now. If I'm Trump, I'm arguing, all right, you saw what happened with these elections. It is clear that the majority of Americans are tired of this censorship stuff. They rejected it. So that's a very, very important test group for you. If you wanted polling that you could derive out, from this last election as to whether or not people want a more controlling totalitarian government or less of one, they answer that question. And by the way, have you seen what's going on in Canada? Where Canada's version of the Democrat Party just forced out their leader because they're polling in the teens and in some instances single digits facing upcoming elections. Over in England as well, there's been a massive drop in support for the more liberal party in England, and they're expected to lose power. And there are a number of reasons that this is occurring. A lot of it has to do with crime and borders and DEI and environmentalism, activism, by way of government. And but one of the realities that has come along with citizens in increasing number of countries across the world speaking out about these things is they are being censored because their governments are doing what our government did under the Biden administration to Meta, and that is pick up the phone and start calling them and say, don't put this on there, don't put that on there. And increasingly, people in countries across the world are rejecting that. And I think Mark Zuckerberg is a long-term thinker in terms of it doesn't matter as much tomorrow what happens, but what does the landscape look like when Trump is gone? And I suspect Trump did a pretty good job of convincing him that these changes are occurring whether Zuckerberg likes it or not. He can either be part of it and help lead it, or he can get left behind. And people like Elon Musk will be leading the curve. And I imagine that to somebody like Zuckerberg, that is a very enticing argument. Now, like I said, I could be totally wrong, and admittedly, that version of things is one that I would like to see be the reality behind it. So it is what I think some people see as almost conflicting reasons, but in reality they're not, the cynical reason of, well, he's just doing it for the bottom line. Well, yeah, he is. But that could conceivably be because Trump has convinced him the bottom line is more freedom. That's what's going to increase the bottom line. That's the movement we're in right now. Well, we'll see. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. symbolism is an interesting tool because, excuse me, if done right, it can be meaningful. Seems as if more often than not, it's not. It's virtue signaling. But I also suspect, I wouldn't be surprised if moving at least part of their infrastructure to Texas, that being Meta, as Zuckerberg announced yesterday, and it wasn't announced in that particular video, but subsequently information was released that Dana White is going to be, I think, on the board or something in some capacity. That is done for street cred purposes. I think that Trump, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump isn't coaching Zuckerberg through this and saying, listen, you got to earn some street cred back. You can't just say, oh, okay, we're going to fix things now, because you've got a credibility issue. So I would move to Texas, and Dana White, and, that's just a sort of like waving a Trump flag. It just lets people know. And while it doesn't mean that the efforts are going to necessarily be fruitful, that they'll be successful, though I do believe that there's a real attempt to change here for the bottom line, it doesn't hurt. And I could see that being something Trump's like, hey, here's a list of people that are known as sort of, Trump world people. You may want to think about putting Kid Rock on there, Dana White maybe. Just listed some of these people. And then like, and I'd move to Texas or Florida, one of those two. And so I just think these little things, in addition to the larger announcements, are part of a massive overhaul in an attempt to be part of what Zuckerberg has been convinced by Trump is the new world and the new way forward for a company that wants to be successful. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. Can you talk about the executive orders that the Biden administration has done in the last week that is supposedly supposed to stop all the offshore drilling, and whether or not Trump can or cannot undo this? I will just very briefly, and I've mentioned this almost offhand in the past, the idea of, and the news is reported like, well, this is going to make it hard, if not impossible, for Trump to undo. And I'm like, no, well, wait a minute here. Out of the gate, the Biden administration was all about undoing as many Trump things as possible. He just went in there. The Keystone Pipeline was one of the first ones. He's just executive order here, executive order there, just undoing anything and everything that he possibly could. But whenever Biden is issuing these executive orders, I just have a very difficult time believing that all of a sudden the incoming president can't undo them. So when Trump leaves, the incoming president, oh yeah, he can undo anything and everything he wants to. When Biden leaves, the incoming president, oh, now all of a sudden the incoming president has no ability whatsoever to make any changes. If that's the case, why even change presidents? Isn't that the point of having an election every 4 years for the presidency, every 6 for Senate, every 2 for House? We decide if we like the direction that things are going, and if we don't, then we put somebody else in charge to take things in a different direction. But if you notice that, and listen, the left, this is how they operate when it comes to everything. The courts are the same thing. I mean, any time the Supreme Court has offered down an opinion that was in line with the left's ideology, what do they call it? Oh, well, that's settled law. That's settled, which means you can't do anything about it. But when the courts come down, Citizens United regarding campaign finance is a great example of it. The left hated that. And they're constantly, we have to overturn that. We have to overturn that. We have to overturn that. When they like it, you can't change it. When they don't like it, it has to be changed immediately. And that's the way that the media is covering this executive order decision. And I suspect that what will happen is, again, when 4 years ago you had Joe Biden being celebrated for all these executive orders, undoing things that, and I mentioned Keystone Pipeline, but how many executive orders did he sign in to undo what Trump did at the border with devastating effect? And he was celebrated for it. Oh, this is wonderful. This is the change that we need. The same people who celebrated that will act as if Trump thinks he's some sort of king and dictator and he could just change whatever he wants to change. So, of course, the question is, can he? I don't know. I think we have gotten so far out of whack in this country about what authority is vested within what division of government and what an executive order even is any longer, that it's a crapshoot. It just depends on the judge it lands in front of. I don't believe that ultimately a structured and consistent rule of law is in play with a lot of this stuff. And so you could have some judge that's really constitutional and says, oh, yeah, or you could have one that just like, no, because he or she hates Trump. So I don't know the answer to that. But I know they're going to act like Trump is doing something horrific. Not just the issue itself or the direction itself, but that he's trying to do something outside the authority of the presidency because, he's a dictator. Weather coming up in just a moment. Also, some new polling out showing that Americans believe that Biden will be viewed as the second worst president in the history of the country. Right now, latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies with a high near 24. Tonight, clear with a low around 13. For your Thursday, cloudy with a high near 37 and a 20% chance of snow after 4 p.m. And then Friday, mostly cloudy with a high near 33.
Regarding the issue, a number of texts coming in of executive orders and what can be done, what can't be undone, and so forth. It would be great if we stopped doing executive orders for both sides of the aisle and the legislative branch would actually do its job and legislate. And yeah, that's true. The original intent of executive order was how to execute something that was passed as law. So it's sort of like a management deal in which legislation and dollars were allocated, passed for a particular thing, but there has to be a decision perhaps made as to, okay, well, do we do it this way or that way? Because that wasn't necessarily specified in the legislation. That's where the how to execute it would come along in an executive order coming from the executive branch. But unfortunately, it's been turned into, particularly with Biden, and Obama did it as well. Well, when the law doesn't get passed, I'll just create the law by issuing an executive order. If an executive order can't be undone by an executive order, then it's a law. Presidents can't make law. Well, yes, constitutionally, that is correct. And then the reason Trump won't be able to undo the executive orders is after Biden signed his name, he also wrote, "No takebacks to infinity." Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. All right. Streaming live, KSGF.com. If you miss any of the show, we will have it up in podcast form, a number of different venues, of course. And we are streaming on, well, maybe we'll be able to stream on Facebook once again. I don't know. That
You never know.
we eventually just shifted over to YouTube because Facebook kept giving us such hassles.
Yeah, they kept doing this thing called censorship.
Yeah. So we'll see how that changes. In fact, I'm moving around a bit the order in which I had planned to talk about some of this stuff because of a text coming in asking if I could talk about Trump wanting Greenland, saying I'm just so confused about this. Well, you should be confused about it because the media, of course, has a fantastic opportunity to educate its audience about something that does have very serious implications, but the vast majority of Americans have no idea about it, no clue whatsoever. But unfortunately, the media is one-dimensional, and when Trump just talks about, hey, maybe Greenland should be a territory of the United States instead of Denmark, Trump's threatening Greenland's sovereignty, and he's going to invade Greenland, and so there's no serious conversation about it. Now, Greenland is a territory of Denmark, just like Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States. And, there's been questions about, well, should maybe Puerto Rico be, the Democrats want Puerto Rico to actually become a state for political reasons. Some argue Puerto Rico should, belong elsewhere as a territory or that it should be its own country. So, number one, it's important to understand these conversations are not unusual. Now, it's not that they happen all of the time, but it's not to have a conversation about a territory of another country and its status and whether that status is still appropriate in the given day. It is not a signal of somebody looking to conquer another country. The argument that has been made, by the way, this isn't just some random thing Trump's like, well, that looks like a neat piece of land, let's take that, is that with the ever-expanding, forward-thinking approach that China is taking to world domination, the geographical landscape as to where superpowers need to be in order to prevent that from happening, in order to proactively prevent China from becoming a threat, involves potentially the need for the United States to utilize Greenland as a territory as opposed to Denmark. The end argument being, because when it comes to which country, if China is going to make military moves that require a military to fight back, which country is the world going to rely on, Denmark or the United States? And Donald Trump, and I think most people would say the United States. If you had to pick someone to try to stop a military advance from China, the U.S. probably would have a better chance than Denmark would. Okay, but what does that have to do with Greenland? PJ Media actually has an excerpt because they have a piece on this. Okay, Trump is serious about acquiring Greenland, and the game is heating up. And they cite in their story a Klingendel Research, which is a Dutch think tank that produces state-of-the-art analysis and policy research in international affairs for governments, businesses, and NGOs. This is what this research group does. Looks at the landscape. It's a think tank. This is what's going on. Here's what's going to happen here. Here's what's happening now. This is what needs to be looked at in the future. They reported back in 2018 that the People's Republic of China published its first Arctic strategy, in which they claimed that the Middle Kingdom is a near Arctic state. It added that it is quickly becoming clear that China has built a geostrategic presence in the Arctic, and it is already reshaping politics in fundamental ways. Circumpolar politics in a fundamental way. So what they're citing here is this one particular Dutch study done back in 2018 that's saying, listen, they are slowly but surely creeping into the Arctic for strategic geopolitical reasons. This is going to be a problem. The report detailed intense Chinese activity in Greenland beginning back in 2005 and noted that, quote, the void created when Greenland was given greater autonomy in 2009 from central authorities in the Kingdom of Denmark and subsequently left the EEC was happily filled by China. Even though the Kingdom of Denmark remains responsible for foreign policy and defense, Greenland can now conclude international agreements with foreign states of its own. This raises issues for both the Kingdom of Denmark and the European Union. Yet, while the Arctic rises in geopolitical and geoeconomic significance, the EU has been slow to reconsider its strategic interest, which is, of course, no surprise. So what this is noting here is there was back in 2009, while Greenland is a territory of Denmark. In 2009, they told Greenland, you know what? When it comes to international agreements with foreign states and everything, in other words, whomever you want to be friends with and work out deals with as your own little, territory, we're going to let you take care of that now. We're not going to micromanage that stuff. Now, Denmark is still the controlling authority over foreign policy and defense for Greenland. But when it comes to, let's say, China wants to build some infrastructure over here, and it's all in the name of some business or factory or infrastructure or whatever, we're going to allow Greenland to do that. And what those who are very concerned about the increasing geopolitical presence of China in and around Greenland in the Arctic is the fact that Greenland has been doing this because China is smart and they're expanding their footprint in places like, Africa and all over the world. They're expanding. But Denmark has been, what many people believe, is absent in their duty of recognizing the international defense implications of this. And this is where Donald Trump is coming from. That Denmark is essentially neglecting its duties and allowing China to become at least expanded in terms of its influence in the world. And Trump's argument here is going to be, if he hasn't articulated it already, that if Denmark isn't going to do it, let's be honest about who the world relies on when it comes to this stuff, and it's the United States. Somebody has to make sure that China does not gain that much ground, and Denmark isn't doing it. So why don't you just let us take this over, and we'll handle that? So now, whether one agrees with that approach or not, I think you could have reasonable people on both sides of the issue and everywhere in between that have different beliefs as to whether or not it would be strategically wise for the United States to take over that responsibility from Denmark, because Denmark is, at least in terms of results, neglecting their responsibilities here. It's not, to me, it's negligent not to talk about this and not to consider it. And it's unfortunate that a subject matter that is very significant and very important. We're talking about one of our enemies, which is China. Let's not forget, this is a country that during the Biden administration was allowed to fly spy balloons over our country. This is a country that spies on us. This is a country that steals our intellectual property. This is a hostile nation to the United States, and they are creeping closer and closer and closer. To look at the territory of Greenland and say, well, Denmark isn't doing their job of keeping their eye on the ball here, maybe we should take over, is not a bad idea. To at least consider it. And this is what I think one of the great frustrations of having a media that is negligent and ill-informed and one-dimensional is this is a very serious and important issue. And this is Trump looking long-term and at ways that we can potentially stave off any sort of military interaction with countries like China, doing things now so that 20 or 30 years from now, doing something isn't much more difficult and problematic. And these are things that serious people should be looking at and discussing and deciding. But instead, because the media and the Democrats hate Donald Trump, well, he's just trying to take over the country of Greenland. And the fact that this is being talked about in the media and reported on, and the vast majority of the people still don't even understand what it's about, that tells you what a poor job the media is doing, intentional or otherwise, of actually reporting on this issue. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Whether you already are in the world of woodworking or metalworking, or maybe it's a hobby you're thinking about getting into, you could start small, start big with the help of Grizzly Industrial. In Springfield, over a quarter of a century, the largest woodworking and metalworking showroom in the entire world, with over 35,000 square feet of machines. That's over 600 on display. South Kansas Expressway in Battlefield, right here in Springfield, open to the public. That's what the showroom floor is for. It's Grizzly Industrial. Traffic update, I'm Nick Reed. Actually, I have Bombas house slippers.
Oh, do you?
Yes, but the socks I wear are Pacas. It's all alpaca stuff.
Yeah.
But I had gotten Bombas house slippers, I think for Christmas one year, and they were I love them. They just fantastic, and I wore through a pair, so I got another one. And I think I got Bombas socks at one point as well. But the Paca socks are just for me the absolute best. They're more expensive, but I'm telling you, they are so fantastic.
I think Bombas is the one that has the really creepy commercial where they've got people with like multiple feet, and it just for some reason just really creeps me out.
Maybe I can't think of
Do you
what
know which
they're.
one I'm talking about? I see it a lot on
No,
streaming.
no.
You would know it if you had
Okay.
had watched it.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, if you like house slippers or looking for some,
Bombas
I
is
love
it,
them.
huh?
I love them. I think that, like I said, I think they sell a lot of other stuff, but that's the one thing that of theirs that I like.
Well, there you have it.
There you have it, everyone.
You're
There's just a little bit of information
There
for
you
you.
go. Your first alert forecast from Colorton Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies with a high near 24. Tonight clear with a low around 13. For your Thursday, cloudy with a high near 37 and a 20% chance of snow after 4 p.m. And then for Friday, mostly cloudy with a high near 33.
Trump, of course, has made a fun little game out of saying maybe Canada could be the 51st state. This is, obviously to make these digs at Trudeau. And like most things, the left is incapable of gauging nuances. They are incapable because of their one-dimensional approach of things, of like absorbing what's really being said and what's really going on here. I find some of it quite amusing. I find it very amusing, Trump talking about Canada being the 51st state.
Do you follow him on Truth or even X? He's been.
Not really, because I just don't get on the platforms hardly.
I'm gonna have to send you some of these because for like the last 2 days, he has created, or at least somebody in his staff has created all of these graphics where it's got the United States and Canada, and he's got big, bold letters, United States, over all of it. And then one of them's got the American flag over both of them.
It's part of the reason it's entertaining, and this is what the left doesn't understand about Trump supporters is so much of this is done for entertainment. It's trolling. It really is truly trolling. This is Trump. It's this relationship that Trump has with his supporters. It's this understanding of a sense of humor where you make a jab, and when you get the sort of response, he throws out an offhand comment. Now, by the way, this is completely 100% different than the Greenland thing. But, the media is trying to throw it all together. I read a headline earlier, Trump threatens the sovereignty of Mexico, Canada, and Greenland. And his comments and references on all of these different things, they couldn't be further from one another in terms of approach and reason behind them. And as we talked in the last segment, there's very serious strategic reasons for his talk of taking the territory of Greenland and arguing that it should be a territory under the United States instead of Denmark like it currently is. But this 51st state of Canada stuff, it's just trolling. And then what the left doesn't realize is that they give him exactly what he wants. And that is, it's not even, what's the best way to describe it? This is part of the connection that Trump knows that he has with his supporters. It is to troll, to get a reaction, and then to play off of the reaction. It's like an inside joke that Trump has with millions and millions and millions of Americans. There used to be a guy on the radio named Phil Hendry, and now he was really, really popular before the internet because the internet kind of would have spoiled the whole magic of his show. But he would he would have guests on his show, and he would actually be the guest as well. And he did a very good job. In fact, he used different microphones for his different personas as he was interviewing himself, just in order to sort of, help his mind switch from one voice to the other. And he would have these guests that were just ragingly insane. Now, again, they were himself. It was him doing it. And he would do it to rile people up. Sometimes he'd have just the quote guest would be somebody that's really racist and say these horribly racist stuff. And Phil Hendry then as the host would just kind of, he wouldn't act appalled, but he would, be like, well, I don't really know how, I feel about that. And that would rile up listeners. How could you let somebody like that on? And the brilliance of his show was he had two separate audiences. There was the audience that didn't know the gig. They didn't understand it. They thought that these were real guests, and they were addicted to being outraged over it. But then there was the real core audience, and that was the listener who knew what was going on, because they would sit back, and I was one of these people, and you would listen to callers calling in not knowing what the joke was. And it was so entertaining because they would be so outraged. And then he, through his characters, would say the most outrageous things back to them. And it was just, it was so brilliant. Now, like I said, you couldn't really pull that off today because with the internet, people would figure it out. But I'm sure you can find some of his old broadcasts. Phil Hendry. I mean, I'm not talking about the 60s or anything. He was on in the 90s and probably the aughts to some degree as well. But that's how Trump is when it comes to some of this trolling. Some of like the Canada 51st state. It is so that his supporters can watch the meltdown occur. And then even when you tell them, listen, don't you understand what's going on? There's trolling, not to say that he's not also at the same time making a point while doing the trolling, but ultimately, Trump is not going to try to make Canada the 51st state of the United States. They still don't get it. I've heard before, I think it was Joe Scarborough once, referencing some of the trolling that Trump does and arguing that, even when Trump says it, Trump supporters, they just justify it by saying he's joking. That's because he is when at times. The fact that these people are so deranged and so have such paranoid delusion that they can't figure out when Trump is trolling them. The irony is they are giving him exactly what he wants. These people want to deny him joy. They want to create a wedge between him and his supporters. But the more of a fit they throw over the trolling, all it does is it makes that bond even stronger. I just love watching it. I think it's one of the most brilliant things. Well, so then here comes this. Leftist Canadian politician fires back at Trump, proposes annexing California, Washington, and Oregon into Canada. Okay. No problem with that whatsoever. I mean, totally 100%. Maybe we'll pick a province. I think Alberta is that the which one? They do have one that's a relatively conservative area. Of course, right now all of Canada is relatively conservative. The Liberal Party there is such a horrific failure that has caused such devastating effects on the average Canadian family that their polling numbers are in the teens and even single digits. This is why Trudeau was forced out, and so there are right now there's this shift where people are more, relatively speaking, conservative in Canada. But I genuinely would have no. In fact, I don't even care about a swap. I would be more than happy with Canada having California, Oregon, and Washington. No problem with that whatsoever. And here, yet again, you have somebody on the left thinking that they're making some point, but they're not making the point that they think they're making. Because I have a feeling that a vast majority of Americans, normal Americans, be like, you know what, that you can have them. And geographically, I mean, it's just kind of bink, bink, bink straight down the line. It's not like there's this mad scattering all over the country or anything. I mean, you got one right on top of the other. If I were Trump, I'd just to further the trolling, I'd say, let's talk. Let's sit down. Let's talk about what that would look like. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. I'm really bad about whether it's Truth Social or X or any of these, and I just don't follow them. Usually, what I see is if there's some sort of article based around it because the left has let their Trump derangement syndrome kick in, or Sarah sends it to me. But I love the one, and it's a picture of it says, well, Elon Musk. So Elon Musk posted this, and then Trump he truthed it out, I guess.
Yeah.
And it says Joe Biden presenting George Soros with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and it's Biden handing the medal to the Emperor in Star Wars. You know, the evil Emperor, the something dark side, that guy. I mean, it's hilarious. And then you said he had a listing of presidents, and it said what was it? Trump 45, liberal staffers 46,
Uh-huh.
Trump 47.
Bunch of just like little shadows and a bunch of question marks. Oh,
I can't. How sad it's got to be on the left and have no sense of humor about stuff. If you had a couple generations ago said, "Hey, there's going to be a shift, a cultural shift in this country, where the conservatives are the ones with a sense of humor that can laugh at themselves, can laugh at others, can have these sort of inside jokes with I mean, all of the social media postings, and just laugh and laugh and laugh, and even at like the Trump dance." I mean, let's be honest, there's nothing about that dance that is actually cool or anything other than it's Trump, but it's just like and I mean, you laugh when you see it, and it's not a laughing at, it's a laughing with. But if you had a couple of like during the '90s, for example, Democrats during the Obama era is when they really started to lose their sense of humor and just become very bitter, and um, but prior to that, the left, they were the ones that were the funny ones, the hip ones, the cool ones, and it was the conservatives that were the curmudgy old people that didn't have a sense of humor. If you had just had the foresight, anyone, to say no, no, that's going to switch, I don't know that I would have believed it. I would have said, nah, there's no way that that's going to happen. I just, not because it obviously, it's not because conservatives aren't capable of humor, and the left isn't capable of just being a bunch of bitter people with no humor, because clearly that's where we are today. But I wouldn't have been able to comprehend what shift would have occurred to foster that evolution. And I mean, it really is Trump, and just his whole presentation was different. And I think it's been a fantastic thing for average Americans, for conservatives, to learn how to laugh, how to have a good time, and just to see the bitter despair. I thought it was so appropriate that Claire McCaskill acknowledged on MSNBC that she's just bitter about this, that Trump wasn't punished more politically, aka he didn't lose the election, so she's bitter at the American people. But I think bitter is just a perfect word to describe the way that the left is in the country today. What a sad way to live. I mean, just what a sad way. To know it's true, all you got to do is read their tweets, read their, it's just this bitterness. Bitter. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. Well, we've had quite a bit of winter weather in the Ozarks over the last couple of days, and it looks like we have some more headed our way tomorrow. And if you have experienced any type of roof or gutter damage due to the winter weather, I want to recommend Josh and his team over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, the weather right now, it is not ideal for roof installs or repairs, but the Pyramid team, they do offer emergency tarp services, and then they can also work through that insurance process with you. And they don't make you sign anything, which not all roofing companies do that, by the way. And then they just try to streamline that process and make it as easy as possible for you. From residential roofing to commercial roofing to even metal roofing, the Pyramid team, they do it all. So if it is time to have the Pyramid Roofing Company team out for a free roof inspection, go ahead and give Josh a call today. Now you can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
President Joe Biden, the second worst president in American history, a Gallup poll found Tuesday. It's quite an accomplishment given that he's still in office. Biden and his aides are trying to make the case that he will be remembered as one of the greatest presidents of all time. Maybe in his mind, he'll be, quote, remembered that way. But that does not appear to be supported by the actual voters. 54% of Americans say Biden will be remembered as a below average president, while 37% say poor. Scratch that. 37 below average, 17% poor. Only 19% say that he will be remembered as outstanding, and 6% above average. Now, what I really genuinely would love are the follow-up questions as to why. Like for the 17% that say, or 19% that he'll be remembered as outstanding. Outstanding. Not above average. Not top 10, but like outstanding, out of the ballpark, fantastic. Why? What do you believe history is going to show Biden to be an outstanding president? I'd love to see a listing of those things. Well, the greatest infrastructure spending bill ever. Oh, okay. All right.
Bidenomics, it's working.
Yeah, Bidenomics. The border thing.
He's not Trump.
Yeah. He prevented Trump from being president. Well, once. I guess he did a USA Today article, and he said that he's back on, I could have won. Then why did you drop out? That's really not a very polite thing to do to Kamala Harris when you're the one who endorsed her. This is what many people within the Obama world and the Biden world and the Harris world have acknowledged is that, Biden was ticked off that they overturned the election of Democrat voters in all 50 states and were forcing him out. And so he said, essentially, well, I'm going to promote Kamala because that's going to back them into a corner. They can't undo that. I mean, that would just, the whole reason that they were doing what they were doing was try to diminish the chaos as best as possible to make things as smooth as possible. And so he comes out and he's like, Kamala Harris, that's who it needs to be, knowing that it would paint him into a corner. They'd have no choice. So now that isn't to say that she would not have been the big donor pick anyhow. They very well could have said, regardless of what Biden wanted, Kamala Harris. But the fact is, he endorsed her. She lost. And then what does he do? To kick her while she's down to come out and say, well, I could have beat him. Very classy of him. Can you imagine if I were Kamala Harris, I wouldn't ever want to be around any of these people again. I think that there is genuine reason to have a degree of sympathy for this woman. She was put more than once in a position that she was not capable of handling. It's not to say she didn't want it. Obviously, she did. But I've always thought it's wrong to knowingly put somebody in a position in which they're over their head. It's wrong for them, and it's wrong for the people that they are presiding over or working over, whether it's a CEO or leader of some sort of nonprofit organization, whatever it may be. And then she's put in the position to run for president by Biden. Biden's the one that leads the charge. She's the one. And then when she fails, he's like, well, I would have beat Trump. Jeez. I'm Kamala. I'm like, can you people stop kicking me while I'm down? I would never want anything to do with any of these people again. So the only president that, according to the polling, that people believe would be listed and remembered as the worst president in the history of the country is Richard Nixon. And that's not really surprising. I suspect rather that most Americans couldn't even tell you why Richard Nixon was a, quote, bad president. They may say the word Watergate, but if you ask them what that was, they're like, I don't know, something to do with a break-in. They don't even know. But because culturally, with the media and pop culture, Richard Nixon has always been presented as this horrible crook, this awful individual. They just know he's really bad. He's sort of the benchmark for worst president ever, and they don't quite feel that Biden can hit that benchmark because, then that would make him winning something, and arguably he's not very good at that, at least as of late. So the second worst president in history. I'm sure the historians, though, the experts, if they were to be asked, would definitely rank him as one of the absolute best. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, for all of your house buying needs, your house selling needs. I recommend you read reviews. And, a lot of those reviews, especially if they are on her Facebook page, that gives you the ability, if you want, reach out to some of those people. If you have any, questions about what was the experience like beyond what you've described, one of the characteristics of so many of the comments left and evaluations left of Emily Johnson is that they are pretty detailed. Sometimes you can tell when people are prompted to do a review and they'll, 5 stars, they were great, or, it's somewhat vague, but you get very specific examples of what makes Emily Johnson great, and that says a lot. So whether it's home buying, home selling, or you have a friend or family member that's moving from out of state and the difficulty of finding a new home when you're out of state, recommend her, Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Coming up, audio from CNN. Data analysis shows how little voters actually care about January 6th as a political issue. Oh, they have tried so hard. So very hard. News in 60 seconds. Springfield's Talk 1041. My name is Nick Reed. Welcome to the show. It's crazy. The elected Democrat that at one point seemingly was the least mentally competent to, even make it to work because he had a stroke. I mean, it's a legitimate thing, Fetterman, and then he went into rehab for a while, that whole weird thing. And so there was a lot of legitimate concern, as there would be with anyone that has brain damage due to a stroke, about the ability to think clearly, to communicate, to speak, particularly when you are in a body that is all about debating issues. The ability to communicate is something pretty important. But for that person to be the one Democrat that more than any others stumbles upon common sense, that says something about the Democrat Party. The Laken Riley Act, named for the 22-year-old Georgia nursing student who was brutally murdered last year by an illegal allowed into the country by the Biden administration, is set to be the first piece of legislation passed by the 119th Congress. The bill, which first passed the House in 2024 with bipartisan support but was blocked by Democrats in the Senate, will come up for a vote Tuesday by the new Congress. Now, this did come up in Congress. This passed. There were a few dozen Democrats that went ahead and voted for it. The vast majority of Democrats voted against it. And what it would do is require the Department of Homeland Security to detain certain non-U.S. nationals, aliens, who have been arrested for a number of different crimes. The bill also authorizes states to sue the federal government for decisions or alleged failures related to immigration enforcement. Under the bill, DHS would detain an individual who, 1, is unlawfully present in the United States or did not possess the necessary documents when applying for admission, and, not or, but and, has been charged with, arrested for, convicted for, or admits to having committed acts that constitute essential elements of burglary, theft, larceny, or shoplifting. And again, in Congress, the vast majority of Democrats voted against this. You may remember there was a time when there would be talk of detainment and deportation, and Democrats would say, well, just because they broke our immigration laws, that doesn't mean they're criminals. And so this sort of answers that. Okay, well, then those who commit crimes. Well, it's amazing how all of a sudden, well, they don't actually count either. We should not detain those individuals either. Now, the reason this is called this references Laken Riley, the Laken Riley Act, is because if it had been in effect at the time, Laken Riley would still be alive because the man who was convicted of her murder had been arrested for child endangerment and shoplifting, and so he would have been in custody not to prey on young women like Laken Riley. So this isn't about illegal immigrants. This is specifically about those who have committed crimes in the United States, and still a majority of Democrats vote against it. Now, the problem potentially that Democrats are facing is that John Fetterman is sponsoring this latest Laken Riley Act in the Senate. And Democrats blocked it from getting even through the Senate the last time around. So now they have one of their own that is supportive of this. So it could potentially put them in a very difficult position of having to go on the record, which they don't like to do when it comes to demonstrating their support for criminals in this country illegally. It's just this default that instinctually is part of the Democrat psyche to let criminals off the hook, the benefit of the doubt. Meanwhile, when it comes to anything that's punitive, like taxes, for example, average citizens, they don't pay enough here. They don't pay enough fines over there. They don't do this. They don't do that. They need to do this. I mean, if you're not willing to vote to detain people who have committed crimes that are in this country illegally, I just don't even know what to say to somebody like that. Fortunately, a majority of Americans voted to reject that sort of ideology. During the last election, some majority of elected Democrats not really paying attention because they were too busy paying attention to January 6th, January 6th, January 6th. Unfortunately, for them, according to CNN's latest polling data, the vast majority of Americans don't care two licks about it. That coming up in just a couple of moments. Weather as well. Right now, the latest news update.
I just went and heated up my coffee and I looked outside and it's snowing. We can't really see in the studio because our windows are tinted, but it is.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Some big old flakes out there.
Oh, wow.
Boo.
Yeah.
I don't like it. The first alert forecast from Color 10, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies, maybe, with a high near 24. Tonight, clear with a low around 13. For your Thursday, cloudy with a high near 37 and a 20% chance of snow after 4 p.m., and that percentage will tick up as we move into Thursday night. And for your Friday, mostly cloudy with a high near 33.
All right, we have last minute availability for lunch bunch today. This is one of my favorite ways of doing it. There's two ways, of course, that we do this. One is you register for Lunch Bunch Retro Metro with Sarah and me to go on Wednesday at ksgf.com, and then you get contacted ahead of time, and then we set it all up, and then we meet there. But then there are the times where people, things pop up, they happen, they oh gosh, can we move it to next week? And we always try to be very accommodating, and so then we get to do the other way, and that is last minute entry, and that's what we're going to do now. So if you would like to join us for lunch at Retro Metro today, they open at 11, but if 11:30 works better for you or whatever, but that's what time, that's the earliest that we could meet, I should say. And you can do that today. Text the word lunch to the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line, which is 417-447-KSGF. If you win, you'll be contacted at 9 o'clock. And then you and up to 5 people can join you, but you don't have to bring 5 people. Sometimes people are like, I can only find a couple people. That's fine. It can be just you if, it's whatever. You're the winner. And so if you want to go again today, Retro Metro, meet us there. They open at 11, but we'll coordinate on what time works best for you today. Text the word lunch to 417-447-KSGF for Lunch Bunch at Retro Metro. I know you mentioned Tom Art said it was sunny in Arkansas. Joe said in Clever it's sunny as well. So,
Well, it was snowing. I don't know if it's still snowing
well,
or
certainly
not.
it isn't sunny here.
No, it's not. It's just gross out.
This is great. We were talking earlier about how Trump and Trump's circle, they troll, and they're only able to do it because people on the left just don't get it. It's just such an enjoyable trolling is this Canada becoming the 51st state thing. So Justin Trudeau yesterday had tweeted out, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. Workers and communities in both our countries benefit from being each other's biggest trading and security partners, to which Elon Musk replied, girl, you're not the governor of Canada anymore. So it doesn't matter what you say. Oh man. I said it earlier. This is part of the bond and the relationship between Trump and Elon Musk is becoming part of this, and the supporters. It's messing with these people, and the fact that they just keep responding, it is so hilarious. I mean, can you think of a better response? Girl, you're not the governor of Canada anymore, so it doesn't matter what you say. Do you think that do they feel burned? I would be humiliated if I'm Trudeau and that comes back. But I guess part of being on the left is the delusion, and so I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to figure out how their minds work. Now, part of the way their minds work, of course, has been to try and constantly remind everyone about January 6th and how important January 6th is. And January 6th, according to Democrats, has been everywhere from, well, it's the worst thing ever to happen in this country since the Civil War. So worse than Pearl Harbor, worse than 9/11, worse than the Oklahoma City bombing, worse than, you just go down the list of atrocities that have occurred. None are as bad as January 6th in the minds of the left. And even outside the United States, had Democrats say that it was no different than the Holocaust or World War II. Talk about a measured evaluation of reality. Now, they've done this because most of us know this. They've never really been able to campaign against Trump on the issues because the overwhelming majority of Americans on most issues, and even on on all issues, the majority of Americans, some overwhelmingly, depending on the issue, say Trump has done a better job than the Democrats have. When the economy, when it comes to security, when it comes to the border, when it comes to just issue after issue after issue after issue. So you think about it realistically, if you're up against an opponent in terms of a vote, and on every issue that matters to people, they say, oh, I like them better. Well, what else are you going to do? So you have to just start trying different things. And January 6th, Hitler leading January 6th, trying to commandeer a limousine so he, as Hitler, could drive to the Capitol and lead the riots to hang Mike Pence. This is something a Democrat, I think lawmakers said, that they were going there in an attempt to hang Mike Pence, which is weird that no one was charged with attempted murder of Mike Pence. You'd think that would be a charge that would come of the Biden administration if that were accurate. But they've made a clear big theme of it. CNN did some number crunching to see, all right, well, when it comes to that particular issue, how important was it to people?
If you go back, 4 years ago, right, Trump's role on January 6, 2021 should make him ineligible to be president. The clear majority of voters said yes, 56%, and that was including removal from office. But of course, Donald Trump won the presidency, and part of the reason why was because views on Trump completely shifted, including Trump's role on January 6, 2021 should make him ineligible for the presidency. By 2023, 2024, it was just 47%. So we saw this drop of about 9 points, and that, of course, is all the difference in the world, going from a majority to short of a majority. And of course, Donald Trump won the vast majority of the other 53% who did not believe that his role on January 6th would make him ineligible for the presidency.
Still a big number, but not enough.
Correct.
Right.
This 9 point shift was tremendous.
All right, let's talk about the why behind it, Harry.
Yeah, why? All right, so part of the reason why is, okay, was Trump greatly responsible for the attack on the Capitol? You go back to January 2021, it was 48%. By the time of December of 2023, look at that. Again, a clear shift down to 37%. This is an 11-point drop, very much mirroring that drop that we saw that the folks said that, of course, would make him ineligible for the presidency. So that is part of the reason why, right? Fewer folks thought he was responsible, greatly responsible for what happened on January 6th. But it's not just that. It's that people simply didn't care as much about the attack on the Capitol. Look at this. January 6th is your biggest memory of Trump's first term in office. By the time of 2024, look at this. It was just 5% of Americans. And among Republicans, it was just 2%. So the bottom line is fewer Americans faulted Donald Trump or thought he was greatly responsible for the January 6th attack. And more than that, as it went into the rearview mirror, far fewer folks thought that it was their number one memory.
So you think about that, though, how remarkable it is, given that that essentially was the campaign theme of the Democrats at January 6th when it came to Donald Trump and felon. And the fact that when asked, though, okay, so what is the biggest, like, when you think of Trump, what do you think of? Only 5% overall said January 6th. Only 5%. You think about how much time and effort and censorship they utilized in order to prevent people from talking about some of the subsequent information that would be released about things that the Pelosi's office was trying to cover up, and what we would learn just in the last couple of months that Trump did days in advance, not just ask if they wanted, but recommended not only reserves but active troops if necessary to keep the Capitol safe. And it was Milley among a couple of individuals that just refused to do it, defied orders. That the one person who actually was actively and did actively try to protect the Capitol was Donald Trump. And all of the people who want him put in prison, claiming he's responsible for January 6th, were the people who defied his orders to protect the Capitol. That's not disputed. That's testimony from these people. From Miller and Milley, both those individuals testify. They acknowledge that they just defied his orders, weren't going to do it. I think as more Americans learn about those, that aspect of it, and then, of course, the pipe bomber with the DNC and just all of these different components, they learn that no police officer was actually killed in the Capitol on January 6th. The only person who was killed was an unarmed Trump supporter. Shot in cold blood. Increasingly, the messaging that Donald Trump was the one who was responsible and that police officers were killed wasn't resonating with people because they were learning the truth. And that's why when it came down to it and time to vote, only 5% even thought of January 1st as or January 6th as the first thing whenever Trump's name was mentioned. I suspect, though, this will not deter them from continuing to talk about January 6th. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. All right, we're doing a last-minute availability for our Lunch Bunch at Retro Metro today. If you want to join Sarah and me for Lunch Bunch at Retro Metro today, along with up to 5 people of your choosing, text the word lunch to 417-447-KSGF. Now, I should have noted when I mentioned this earlier that the winner, Sarah will reach out to you to set it up. So that will be around 9 o'clock. So if you do register, don't forget, and then check your phone at 11 because it'll be too late by then. If you can, just check your phone around 9:05, and see if you did get that text so we can coordinate what time that you'll want to meet there. That is for today at Retro Metro, our lunch bunch, Sarah and me, and then you and up to 5 people, but you don't have to bring anyone if you don't want to. Text the word lunch, 417-447-KSGF.
Springfield's Talk 1041, your first alert forecast from Colorton, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we have a chance of flurries before noon and then mostly sunny skies with a high near 24. Tonight, clear with a low around 13. For your Thursday, cloudy with a high near 37 and a 20% chance of snow after 4 p.m., and that percentage will tick up as we move into Thursday night. And for your Friday, mostly cloudy with a high near 33.
So, evidently in this USA article that Biden did, he still claims that he meant it when he says that he won't pardon, or that he wouldn't pardon Hunter.
Uh-oh.
He claims that he, quote, meant what I said when he pledged not to pardon his son Hunter, admitting in a new interview that he hoped it didn't set a precedent for future presidents to abuse pardon powers. Well, at least he's acknowledging that this is widely seen as an abuse of power. That's an honest acknowledgement. In an exit interview with USA Today published today, he defended one of his most controversial moves in office while appearing, according to the transcript, to be confused about the timeline of his son's actions. Well, of course he was. So he said, quote, I hope not, because I meant what I said when I was asked whether I was going to pardon my son. Biden said, but then I found out 2 factors. Number one, that he had paid all of his taxes. He paid them late. He was fighting a drug problem, and he beat it. He's been square and sober for almost 6 years now. That was back in the 80s. I mean, excuse me, in 2000. And what year was it? Anyway, long time ago. Christmas. Well, and of course, the problem was he did know about all of that was known. This, again, if you get caught not paying your taxes and then you do it years later, they don't say, oh, okay, never mind then. See, this is the presentation that they give to try and mislead people into thinking that that's something that's legit. That, well, if you just don't pay taxes for years and years and years, and you eventually get caught not doing it, and so they come after you, you don't then get to just say, oh, wait, here's the money. And by the way, it wasn't even his own money. It was someone else's money that paid it for him. And then that means that you didn't break the law. That's like saying you rob a bank and then the police catch you and then you're like, oh, sorry, here's the money back. What do you mean you're still going to arrest me? That's not how that works. So given that, plus Biden confused as to the timeline and everything, it's just more total and complete BS. I suspect that over time, when the discussion of corruption in this administration comes up and this is noted, that eventually what's going to happen, all of the bad things that occurred during the Biden years, Democrats are going to blame on his dementia. Well, he didn't mean to do it, or, well, no, that didn't count because he wasn't in his right mind. The same people who have been lying to us for years about how on the ball and sharp he is are going to start using that to justify all of the bad things that have occurred, the corrupt things, the poor policy decisions. I suspect they'll even use it to try and excuse incidents like Afghanistan and funneling money to Iran to fund the attack on Israel and a number of other just devastatingly boneheaded moves by this administration. I think that that's eventually what's going to happen. That will be their catch-all. Well, he had dementia, so that doesn't count. That's not a legitimate result of Democrat approach and policy. Time will tell. There's a story of Missouri lawmakers preparing to discuss tax cuts in the 2025 legislative session. Starting today, Jeff City, lawmakers, first day of the legislative session. Hannah Falcon, KY3 is a story. Republicans and Democrats want to lessen Missourians' financial burden. Both parties think tax cuts could be a solution, but can't agree on which taxes to cut. This is a I'd say an accurate portrayal of the vision and approach of two different ideologies when it comes to the role of government. So what you essentially have is Republicans that are saying, hey, what do tax cuts mean? It means tax cuts that you are paying for. You pay less of them or none of them. Income taxes. The new Senate Majority Floor Leader, Luke Meyer, said that his party hopes to tackle income taxes this year. Several Republican lawmakers have already written bills to phase out the state income tax. Luke Meyer saying income tax is just punishing somebody for having a job and going out and making money, and so that's why we really need to see the income tax cut. The new House Minority Caucus leader, Democrat Representative Ashley Ahn, believes cutting income taxes wouldn't help the most needy Missourians. So they get to decide who's needy. She says, what I'd like to see is, ending sales tax on groceries, ending, the pink tax on luxury items like tampons and diapers, those are the things that would actually make life easier. So this is somebody whose version of a tax cut or vision of a tax cut is essentially telling you, as long as you make certain purchases or do certain things, then they will allow you to keep some of your own money. But in many of these instances, these are going to be people who are not paying income tax at all. So, in fact, it's not a tax, oftentimes, depending on how it's, provided back, but in fact, a form of welfare. The idea that cutting income taxes is not helpful to people shows how desperately out of touch the Democrat Party is in the state of Missouri, well, across the country, but in this case, the state of Missouri. Are you kidding me? And I love this, that here, a politician defining who needs the money the most, their own money the most. Now, if it is an income tax, that's definitely without question your own money. But if you are talking about ending sales taxes, picking and choosing certain products, if the person is purchasing those products through, taxpayer-funded dollars, that's not a tax cut for that person anyhow. It's just more welfare. Now, some people, of course, if you cut taxes on groceries or eliminate sales tax on groceries, that is going to be helpful to a lot of people. But it really gives you a sense that it's control. Even if you can get some people in government to acknowledge that there should be the allowance of tax cuts, they just can't go straight for, okay, well, we'll just cut taxes. If you pay income taxes, we're going to cut them. They have to tell you which of you. They have to pick and choose. Well, people who do this, people who do that. And I'm not saying that Republicans don't play that game as well when it comes to tax credits, but I thought this was interesting that when it comes to people in Missouri keeping more of their own money or more of other people's money, the Republican approach is, hey, people who are paying state income tax right now, that's money that is theirs, no question, and so they get to keep it, while the Democrat side is, well, we're going to really pick and choose what people we think should be allowed to keep some of their own money or some of other people's money. Just that need to control people's lives. Oh, speaking of this need to control people's lives, the Biden administration working to effectively ban cigarettes in the 11th hour, which would be a gift to cartels, according to the experts. The Food and Drug Administration under the Biden administration, or under Biden, moving forward with a regulatory rule in the final days of the Biden administration that would effectively ban cigarettes currently on the market in favor of products with lower nicotine levels, which could end up boosting business for cartels operating on the black market, according to cartel experts. Well, of course, because about everything this administration does benefits criminals. And this is just another example. Rich Marianos, former assistant director of the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and the current chair of the Tobacco Law Enforcement Network, said, quote, Biden's ban is a gift with a bow and balloons to organized crime cartels. Whether it's cartels, Chinese organized crime, or Russian mafia, it's going to keep America smoking, and it's going to make the streets more violent. The FDA admitted to Fox Digital on Monday that as of January 3rd, the tobacco product standard for nicotine level of certain tobacco products had completed a regulatory review, but that the proposed rule had not yet been finished. So you've got these two-step question here. One, is it going to do what is intended? Well, no, first, is this the role of government? Is it the role of government to make these decisions for every human being walking the planet that, okay, well, we'll let you smoke, but we're going to tell you you can only smoke this particular type of cigarette and lower the nicotine? Now, if your answer is yes, then, well, will it work? What's the point of this? I'd like to at least know what their reason for doing this. Is it to try and prevent people from smoking? Well, if nicotine is the addictive component here, one of two things is going to happen. What does this mean is going to need to happen? If you smoke cigarettes for the nicotine, and the federal government diminishes the amount of nicotine that's in a cigarette, but your body is accustomed to and craves a certain level of nicotine, what does that mean? That means you're going to have to buy and smoke more cigarettes. If you are accustomed to a certain amount of caffeine to get you going in the morning, and your standard serving has a particular amount of caffeine that your body is accustomed to, and all of a sudden that is cut in half, what are you going to do in order to sustain that level that your body is accustomed to? You're going to drink 2 servings of said drink. So this isn't going to decrease smoking if that is the desired result, but it's going to cause people to need to smoke additional cigarettes in order to get the same nicotine fix. So they're actually going to be encouraging people to smoke more cigarettes. Or, and this is what the former assistant director of ATF-E is saying, this is going to be a huge boom to criminal enterprise because you're going to have Chinese mafia, you're going to have the Russians, I'm sure drug cartels from south of the border that are going to flood the market with cigarettes illegally that have the nicotine levels that people are accustomed to. And isn't this just a perfect scenario? Actually offering a product, the criminals offering a product that requires the purchaser of the product to smoke less than the government's product by the form of fascism, telling private tobacco companies you can own a company, but we're going to tell you what you can sell, how you can sell it. And so they're just going to make a more dangerous product. And it's typical government, and typical government that's run by the left, harming the very people you claim you're trying to help. I mean, just Wreck-It Ralph swinging that sledgehammer on the way out of the White House. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. I want a great homeloan.com. Your home loan needs, maybe it's refinancing or just getting some advice and direction from the experts within the Carricker team at iwantagreathomeloan.com. They're just great folks like that. They're big believers in sharing information to help you make the best decision possible. There's a lot of places, and I get it. You're a business, and somebody that is taking up your time that you don't really know whether they're going to actually use your services, you see that as just wasting your money because when you're working with them, you're not spending time with somebody that is going to utilize your services. But that's not how the Carrickers, they don't work that way. They don't function that way. And so utilize them as a resource as you formulate your plan forward. And if you already have a plan that you are looking towards when it comes to financing a home purchase or refinancing with your standard financial institution, get a second opinion from them. It certainly isn't going to hurt at all. iwantagreathomeloan.com because you do. Nearly half of Wisconsin's to-be-built electric vehicle charging stations will be built at Quick Trips. This is a story from Center Square in Wisconsin. This is an EV story. We've got these two different worlds going on, one in which reality is coming into play when it comes to the world of electric vehicles, and then you still have those in government that are trying to force this end result that is in defiance of the economy, that is in defiance of supply and demand, that is in defiance of the desires of the consumer, and that are in defiance of the environment. Governor Tony Evers on Thursday announced the next step for the state's EV charging network. In all, Wisconsin will build 53 charging stations across the state. So the government's going to do this. He said, quote, "The EV charging network will support drivers, businesses, tourists, and our economy and workforce as we move towards a cleaner, more sustainable, more efficient future in Wisconsin," he said in a statement. Just about everything in that statement is factually incorrect. The EV charging network will support drivers, businesses, tourists, and our economy. Now, I can't say that that is absolutely false, but I'd like some explanation as to how that is going to help. He says that this is going to help them move towards a cleaner, more sustainable, and efficient future in Wisconsin. Electric vehicles are not cleaner. They are not cleaner. And depending on their usage, at times they have been evaluated to be even more damaging to the environment than the traditional vehicle. It depends on the vehicle, of course. But there can be a person out there doing the same amount of driving, much less damage to the environment, driving a traditional gasoline-powered vehicle versus somebody who is driving an electric vehicle. A lot of that has to do with the mineral extractions that are needed that are done in countries, China primarily, or by China, whether it's in China or Africa, that have no environmental regulations whatsoever, use child slave labor. It is not cleaner. This is a scam. We have to get past this thinking that because there is no tailpipe on the back of it, that means it's a green vehicle. It's good for the environment. No, it isn't. If you want fascism, a.k.a. government dictating to the automobile industry, you have to sell this many of electric vehicles, and you got to do this, you got to do that. Put all of these restrictions on and regulations on people and the automobile industry. Okay. But since you're doing it by force anyway, you might as well stop lying about the reasons you're doing it. This is not good for the environment. It's also not more sustainable. If it were more sustainable, government wouldn't have to force people to do it. Government wouldn't have to subsidize it. I think these people do not understand what the term sustain means or what sustainable means. How can you sustain the industry artificially by forcing taxpayers to subsidize these corporations and by forcing taxpayers to build these electric, plug-in outlets everywhere? I mean, yeah, I suppose you could sustain that artificial environment, but that's not self-sustaining. More efficient? In what way? There's nothing that is more efficient overall when it comes to this entire concept. Again, if it was, do you know who would be leading the charge on it? Private industry. Because efficiency means savings in dollars, means cost cutting, means that the consumer benefits and the producer of the product benefits as well. Something that is self-sustaining does not need government force. Something that is efficient does not need government force. In fact, government, by definition, makes things inefficient if they're not already. The heart of the new plan, $78 million in national electric vehicle infrastructure money from Washington, D.C. Again, this is specifically Wisconsin. Some of that money, more than $23 million, has been earmarked for private companies to add EV chargers at their business. So this is what would be called corporate welfare. Unless it's something that Democrats like, and then it's just good. The new plan includes more than a few of the EV charging stations, Oneida Casino in Green Bay, Holiday Inn Express in Wauwatosa, a handful of small markets through rural Wisconsin. But Quick Trip will get nearly half of the EV chargers. Of the 53 stations Evers announced, 24 will be built at Quick Trips across the country. Wisconsin's EV charging money will come into the state over the next 5 years. Both Thompson and the governor, Thompson is the transportation secretary, say the 53 charging projects announced Thursday are only the first round. There's no word just when the work will begin on the first round of EV charges. There was another article, I believe they referenced their goal is to have one every 30 miles. Is that the efficiency they're talking about? As opposed to having a regular automobile where you can, like, any 1 or 2 miles stop at a station. Sometimes they're across from one another, and they'll have, how many, quote, charging, we'll call them filling stations, does Buc-ee's have? Hundreds? One every 30 miles. Well, that is efficient. Only in the minds of government. Can something that is damaging to the environment be good for the environment? Something that requires the government to force people to do it, call that efficient? And, something that government has to, again, subsidize, claim that that's self-sufficient. That's government. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. Great day, everyone. Glenn Beck's next. I will talk with you